So how do we do this? Where do we get a compiler? Well, most of us.
What did you guys use back in your day for a compiler and in a development environment for CS50 when you took the class?
So for a compiler, we were using GCC, the GNU C compiler.
Sure.
And in 2006, when I took CS50, we were using nice.fas.harvard.edu. Do you remember that?
I do, which was the new instructional computing environment.
Right, the ICE was still there, the non-new, the old. But yeah, it was really different. So, we didn't learn anything about like SSHing, and so most of the students in the class were using Macs or PCs. They didn't have Linux boxes, and so we would be going into the basement of the Science Center, where there were 30 or so computers that had Linux environments on them. And we would log in and use that, and we could only really do our work in our accounts.
It was just the terminal window,
It was just the terminal window.
What'd you use for a code editor?
I was an Emacs person. Mike Smith taught Emacs.
I still can't figure out how to quit out of Emacs.
I can't figure out how to quit out of Vim, so.
Quite the team.
Yeah. So at least we know who can use what if we need to, just so we know where to turn. I get the same flack for using Windows computers in the office now too. But yeah, it was certainly not a very user-friendly experience, particularly as somebody like me who had never taken a computer science class before, to be thrust into this Linux environment where everything is brand new.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And I know when you took over the class, we sort of made this conscious decision to make this a little bit better. We suffered through NICE for, not suffered through, but we used NICE for maybe 2 years.
But we consciously introduced Nano, which is based on Pico, which is a simpler text editor than both
much
Vim
less
and
heavy.
Emacs, but it still has like syntax highlighting, which was an appealing feature.
Yep. Then we had the cloud.cs50.net. We gave every student an account,
which was
sort
our
of simulated
own recreation,
the
but
NICE
that we had like
environment.
root privileges on, so we
Right,
could
so
install the
we could
software
install
we
necessary
wanted.
software, which is really good.
Yep.
But sort of the big change, I think, was around 2011 or 12 when we had the CS50 appliance. So students could then download a virtual machine onto their existing Mac or PC, and using a hypervisor, have a replication of their environment without having to go to the computer lab or be intimately familiar with the Linux environment.
And that was actually originally a side effect. Like, we had developed the CS50 appliance really for our online students, the open courseware students who were following along passively and who really wanted to be able to engage more actively. And it was only once that got pretty stable that we realized, wow, why don't we just use this on campus as well?
Right. So we did that for maybe 3 years or so, constantly updating it. Different. I know we switched between Ubuntu and Fedora for
It was pretty
a couple
painful
times.
keeping the thing updated, though, honestly.
I'm sure it was. But then it became big. It was a big file to have to keep
2
downloading.
gigabytes, yeah.
And this sort of the CS50 IDE by our former colleague Dan Armendariz, among others, working with folks at Cloud9. This was game changing. This now students can follow along just in their browser and have all their work saved to the cloud. And it doesn't require this huge download. It really changed the way that I think students engage with the class. I've certainly pivoted to do a lot of my own development, even in IDE. It's just such a great tool for students to have, and for teachers to have too. Teachers can share workspaces with their students and help them follow along that way.
Yeah, a lot of the add-on features.
When we used to have Cloud, we would have this the impersonate feature or something, so we could try and help a student out remotely that way.
But what's nice, and what was prerequisite before we made this move, was to find an environment like Cloud9 that gives us a terminal window, and better yet, root access for the students so they can install anything they want for final projects or tools or whatnot, while still getting the niceties like a graphical code editor and the file browser, which really, I think, don't do students a disservice. The reality is those are the UIs they're using on their own computers, but you still have the power of that command line environment, and we're not abstracting too much away.
Yeah, it's not like we've taken a GUI operating system front end like Cinnamon or something and just stuck it into a web-based environment. You still have that file tree on the left, but you're really mostly working in a terminal-based environment and getting students acclimated to it fairly quickly.
Yeah. And especially for some of our high school students and teachers who don't have access to install software on their own school's computer labs, game-changing, as you say.